Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. On this episode, PJ Smith returns to the podcast. PJ and I discuss Bobbin 2025, and we take a deep dive into winter fishing in the Driftless. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend, and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And thanks to our friends at the Fly Fishing Show for sponsoring the episode. The 2025 season is in full swing, with the show stopping in Bellevue this weekend before heading on to Denver, Pleasanton, and Lancaster. Come out and visit with old friends and make a few new ones. It should be a great time. For dates, ticket and class info, and other event details, head over to www.flyfishingshow.com. And a shout out to our sponsor, Trout Routes. I've known Zach and the team at Trout Routes almost before Zach had a team at Trout Routes. We all know streams are getting crowded, and chances are you're not the only one at your local access point. Get away from the crowds and busy gravel lots by using Trout Routes Pro, with over 350,000 access points mapped across 50,000 trout streams and much more. Trout Routes has all the data you need to help you find angling opportunities that others will overlook. Up your game and download the app today. Use code ARTFLY20, ARTFLY20, all one word, for 20% off of your Trout Routes Pro membership at maps.troutroutes.com. Now, on to our interview. Well, PJ, welcome back to the Articulate Fly.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to a nice chat about winter fishing.
Absolutely. And, it was great seeing you at Bobbin. I always love kind of, meeting guests in person and meeting listeners in person. It was a fantastic weekend. What was the highlight for you?
Oh, the highlight. Boy, I got to see a lot of friends that I haven't seen in a while. Some awesome tires there. Just the skill level. These guys definitely are some of the best tires around the nation. That was probably a big thing for me. Got to see some really cool patterns. Listening to some of the guys in the hot seat, that was kind of cool in the shop. I think it was Charlie Craven, seeing his baby Gunga. That's actually a really good pattern that I really like. So being able to see that being done firsthand was awesome. So I've actually got some materials, planning on tying some more of that when I can. And then, just seeing all the people there, very like-minded people. So, those shows are awesome. It was really nice weather, turned out really good. So definitely a fun time there in Ypsilanti. So, yeah.
Neat. And so, have to ask you, I don't think we've kind of pinged each other on social media throughout the fishing season, but, how was your 2024 season?
2024 season was really good. Trout fishing was really good. Right around June, things really started to heat up. So trout fishing kind of got put on hold. We really focused on the smallmouth fishing, which we'll definitely be doing again this year. We're almost to the point where we're going to kind of shut off our trout fishing around June, switch over to smallmouth, pike, and muskie. Obviously weather dependent, but season was really good. Smallmouth fishing was awesome. Even we had some high water events that kind of put a little damper on some stuff, but we were able to get back at it. I had to move a few clients, but we were able to get everybody in. And then right towards the end of the season, I believe like end of August, I was pretty much booked up until mid-October. So one of my better seasons to be booked up. And we're looking to basically be doing the same thing again this year. So, it was great fish. And, it was really awesome to spend so much more time in the drift boat. I really enjoyed doing that. So, good 2024 season.
Yeah, that's great. And so how was your deer season?
Deer season was good. I put a couple in the freezer. It's always super fun to kind of finish out and head to Missouri, head to our farm there, and just kind of, I don't know, fill the batteries and just kind of do my own thing, not have to worry about clients. I love my clients dearly, but it's nice to just kind of have some alone time. My wife was able to come and visit for a week. I was able to do a lot of work on the farm while I was there. So yeah, super fun. Got some deer, filled the freezer. Yeah, it was great.
Well, that's awesome. And so, your home waters are in the Driftless area. And, for folks that aren't familiar, can you tell us a little about the area and kind of what makes it so special?
Sure. The Driftless area, it incorporates a lot of land. It's in 4 states. So it's in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and a little piece of Illinois. And it's mostly on either side of the Mississippi. And it is where the glaciers did not advance. So it's kind of like a big rock in the middle of a creek or river. So when the glaciers came down, they split around and kind of encircled this area as kind of a high point. So we have really deep ravines. In those deep ravines, there's nice little creeks that spring up, so spring creeks, and they hold awesome little trout, either browns or brookies. There are some places that they've put in rainbows in that too. Obviously, the browns were brought in, but the brookies are kind of the true native. But yeah, it's a really special place, kind of untouched to a certain point. I mean, there's a lot of farming, agriculture going on, but overall, it's just a great area that's kind of a hidden gem that some people know about, and slowly more and more people are finding out. But it's awesome fishing. Doesn't matter what side you're on, whether you're on the Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. Not too much going on in Illinois side, but again, there are some waters there. So yeah, but pretty special area.
Yeah, and kind of, I guess, maybe an analog a little bit would maybe be some of our like Pennsylvania spring-fed creeks, right?
Yeah, most definitely. There's a lot of water that is similar. When we've been to Vermont, some of those creeks, they're very similar, small, very tight areas that just kind of meander through, the landscape, and nice, small, tight areas that you can use a nice 3-weight. Sometimes it's wooded, sometimes it's open pasture land, but it's really a good place to kind of just get out in nature, I would say. But yeah, super fun.
Yeah, and you wanted to come back on the podcast to talk about winter fishing in the Driftless, and I was kind of curious. I saw these posts. Winter season is opening. I guess, is there an official winter season, or I guess maybe you have a closed season and then it opens and it happens to open in the wintertime?
Yeah, so our season officially opens for a catch and release season the first Saturday in January. And then that season will go to the first Saturday in May. And then it opens up fully. So there's a catch and keep season that kind of starts. And then the season goes and this is for trout. Season goes all the way to October 15th, and then it shuts off. And that's to kind of allow for hunting here in Wisconsin. It also allows the fish to kind of spawn without being harassed, I would say. Not that guys are harassing the fish, but kind of gives them a break. So we've got a few months off. It's kind of nice for me because then I can go deer hunting and that. But it's, there are other areas I know over in Minnesota and Iowa. There's a little bit of water that you can actually fish all season. But here in Wisconsin, they give them a break, and then we fire right back up in January. So, so we get that winter into spring, fall, summer, and then into fall. So we kind of hit all the seasons.
Got it. And, I was just up with you in Michigan, so I was reacquainted with how cold it is in the wintertime in the Midwest. And I'm getting soft. It's not as cold in the Mid-Atlantic as it was when I was a kid. But, before we get to, like tackle, why don't we talk about, how you go fish in the wintertime and you don't freeze to death?
Yeah. So that's a huge question that I get a lot. Some guys really do not like to fish when it's super cold. I kind of look at it's just a great way to get out. It kind of helps that cabin fever that a lot of guys will get. So I think it's super fun. I definitely will pick nicer days. You can definitely sleep in. You don't have to get out there at the crack of dawn. It's a time where you can pick your days. You're looking at weather. You want kind of some time where it's going to be fairly comfortable for you to be out. I was out for the opener this year, and it was 16 degrees, which was pretty cold, not fun. I did get into some fish, but it was not definitely not ideal, and I wasn't out there that long. But overall, I'd say anything in that 25 plus degrees is not too bad, and that would be air temperature. And then you want to kind of watch the water temperature as well. If we had snow on the ground when it's really warm, you kind of got to watch, because you want to make sure that if it is really warm, you want to watch that melt water going in, because it'll actually drop the temperature significantly. So you're kind of looking at that 9 o'clock to say about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Ideal. Having a thermometer with you to check those water temps is pretty critical, because you will see, especially if you have snowpack, you will see during that afternoon, all of a sudden you're not hooking into fish, you're not seeing any risers. So that usually means the water temp's actually going back down. So some people will be like, well, it's so warm outside. But I'm like, you're getting that snow melt in there, and it's making changes. So when you are getting out there, you want to make sure you wear the proper clothes. You're looking for those layers. Layers are a big thing. I actually wear almost like a sun shirt or quick dry shirt for underneath. And then I'll layer like a wool sweater or a fleece sweater. And then depending on conditions, I'll wear like a rain jacket, wind jacket, or like a puffy. So it depends on how cold it is. We were talking about gloves. That's always the hard part for a lot of people. Nitrile gloves are definitely a key for that. We've added them. So you can wear those nitrile gloves, keeps your hands warm to a certain degree. Again, they have no insulating value, but they keep your hands from getting wet. Wet hands make cold hands. So if you keep your hands dry, the other thing I carry is a small towel. When your hands do get wet, you can dry them off quickly. And then as far as the bottoms go, good Gore-Tex waders or breathable waders. I guess now Gore-Tex is kind of on the out, but good breathable waders. I usually get away with a pair of wool socks, like heavier wool socks. Nothing too big. I don't want to overpack my feet into my boots, because when you start cutting off that circulation there, then next thing you know, you have cold feet. So a lot of people think you've got to like super bundle, and you don't have to. But so if you kind of go that way, I mean, if it's really cold or you tend to run cold, having like long johns and then like fleece pants and then maybe a thin sock and then an over sock. That kind of works too. You want to make sure your gear, if it feels tight, it's not going to be great for you. So some people will wear different gear. You know, they'll have like a winter setup and then like a summer setup, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, like, I know every time I buy boots, you know, I'm always getting a size larger, right? Just because I want to have, you know, that room to your point, not, you know, cut off the circulation of my feet and feel like it's freezing. You know, also too, you know, it's interesting. It's kind of funny. Like I keep having this kind of running debate with my steelhead buddies, but I always wear like, you know, it's one thing if you're wearing like a light puffy and it's not really cold, but like if I'm steelheading and I need to wear like a heavier coat, I always put that on over my waders to trap all that heat.
Yeah, I tend to put stuff over the top. When you try to start stuffing your waders, again, I'm a big guy, and my wader, you can only stuff so much into a sausage casing, you might say. So yeah, I tend to put it over the top, and it does kind of help trap that heat. Again, I'm not going super deep. These streams are really kind of shallow. I'm not going to, you know, if I go above my knees, that's pretty deep. So I try to limit myself how deep I go, and then I can layer that heavier jacket over the top. Because if you're stuffing it in, you're actually kind of defeating the insulating properties of it. So I'm kind of, I want to keep it loose. I want to be able to move around easily. So you want to make sure you've got that ability to do that. Like an over jacket needs to be big enough. I mean, even a rain jacket over a sweater will help you stay pretty well insulated because you've got that air trapped underneath, say, like a rain jacket. So that kind of helps. And then you also want to make sure the other thing is like wearing like a hat and maybe a stocking cap over that. Kind of like a steelheader style. I wear a regular ball cap and then I'll wear a stocking cap over the top of that. So I've kind of got that coverage from the sun and then, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've got a Sims Windstopper stocking cap that like there's no way I would part with that thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you kind of, again, you start picking out gear that really works for you. I mean, I've done enough mountaineering and climbing out west and stuff like that. So I've got a lot of carryover from that. I really like fleece, but now some of the polar puffy type stuff. I can't think of the name of what a lot of the insulating stuff. It's kind of like a down jacket, but it's that polar material. That stuff is amazing right now. And it doesn't really lose its value if it gets a little wet. So it's super nice. Many of the manufacturers are using that. So, and it's nice and lightweight too, where like fleece can be kind of heavy, like a wool sweater is pretty heavy. Again, I kind of like the older school, but that's just kind of me. There's a lot of good fabrics out there. The other thing I do, I will keep a pair of mittens with me or some heavier gloves, just so if my hands do start to get cold, I can shove those, my hands, even with the nitro glove on, I'll shove them into my gloves or mittens. And then I'll also carry some hand warmers, usually just the chemical ones, super easy to carry. So it kind of works out that way. Because once your hands start getting cold, or if they get really cold, it's really hard to come back from that. So you really have to know what your limits are. And we're not going out for 8 hours. It's usually at the most maybe a 4-hour trip. And most of the time it's actually more like 2. So kind of limited that way.
Yeah, and I've got those Sims steel heading gloves that I really like that are like the mittens with the you peel them back and they have the fingers. And
Yeah.
and you wear
Yep.
the nitrile underneath those, and you can do a lot, and you can tuck hand warmers in the tops of your hands in that, and it works pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, my hands tend to stay fairly good, but I know other people just have problems with their hands. That's usually the deciding factor, or even with their legs, they don't have the best circulation. I try to tell people don't be afraid to put some calories on either. That's another thing coming from the climbing side of the world. It wouldn't be unheard of us throwing like 4,000 or 5,000 calories down at a time, because you've got to fuel that engine. So don't be afraid to have those pancakes in the morning with some syrup and butter. So you want to keep yourself fueled. I try to keep myself pretty hydrated as well. When you're dehydrated, it will definitely affect your circulation. So I try to stay pretty hydrated. I will have a little flask. It's always kind of nice. Again, don't overdo it, because you don't want to stumble or anything like that. But just little things like that kind of make the day kind of fun. Again, we're going out to have a good time, be out in nature, try to catch some fish, and spend some time with friends and family and stuff. So, but you want to have a good time at it. So be smart about it. I mean, I see some guys that they're like, "Oh, I threw a granola bar in. That should cover me." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you're going to have a hard day, especially if it's windy and cold." So,
yeah, absolutely. And so, I think we've pretty well covered the kind of the non-fishing part of the gear. What's your preferred like rod, reel, and line and leader setup for winter fishing?
So preferred rod, reel, I usually fish really lightweight stuff. But for wintertime, I kind of will go up. I'll either a 4 or a 5 weight, because I'm usually throwing slightly heavier nymphs. As far as reel goes, it's my standard go-to. I run Orvis H3s or H4s now, and the reel's just either the Helios or one of those, just a standard reel setup. I use the same line that I do throughout the season, which is Scientific Angler Creek Trout. It is a phenomenal, especially for the short game. It loads the rod properly. It's really nice. Holds up to the weather pretty well. And will turn over just about everything, even like streamers and stuff like that. As far as leader goes, I'll usually run like a 7 foot or a 7.5 foot 3X, maybe a 4X. Kind of depends, especially now we've got thinner water. So I may downsize a little bit. Using that shorter leader, like a 7.5 footer, I can always add on some tippet as I need and then go down that size. So if it's 3X, I'll drop down to 4 or 5X. I try to keep it fairly easy, and that's really kind of my go-to for any season. But in the wintertime, I'll usually try to stick to that. I am throwing slightly bigger nymphs, jigs, stuff like that will takes a little bit more to turn over, plus the indicator and that. So that's kind of my standard setup. Again, I adjust as need be, but pretty standard like that. And then that throughout the season, so I don't have to change up too much.
Got it. And I would imagine I haven't, seen that fly line from SA before. I'm assuming it's probably a really aggressive, like weight forward taper.
Yeah, when they first came out with it, it used to be called the SBT, so short belly taper, and then they've changed it to creek trout. So it is, I believe it is a line heavy. So 3 weight would be a 4 weight and so on. So a 4 weight is actually a 5 weight. they've concentrated it super tight to the front of the head, all that weight. So on these creeks, you're not casting very far. A 25-foot cast is far. I mean, there are some areas where you will cast farther, but most of the time you're casting maybe as short as 10 feet or less, all the way up to maybe 25 feet if you get into a long run and stuff like that. But it's a great, I mean, that really was a game changer. So it helps load those rods. So you're kind of looking for that. A lot of times the bellies on a lot of these lines are made, 30 feet plus. Well, if you're not even casting over 30 feet, you've got to load that rod. That's why so many people started overlining, especially here in the Driftless. So, yeah, I talked to SA. Those guys over there are awesome. Eric, he's like, you got to try this line out there in the Driftless. And I'll tell you, it truly was one of those, like, the holy, like, line that just really started setting it off for me. It makes everything a little bit easier. Some people like other lines from SA, but this for my game, it works really well. It's nice for clients too, because it's sometimes hard for them to load the line. This line will help load that rod a little better, especially the smaller rods, the 3s and the 4s that I'm using. It helps load that rod properly.
Got it. And, so I think we've covered the tackle part pretty well. Let's talk a little bit about your preferred flies.
So preferred flies, I have a number of them. I kind of like little streamer patterns, kind of like a small slump buster. I'll actually tie a slump buster with pine squirrel, and then a cone head. Works super awesome. I have a couple other little patterns. I call them a jiggy nymph streamer. So there's on slightly bigger jig hooks, tungsten bead, and then I'll use like a pine squirrel. I love pine squirrel for kind of a nymphy type pattern. It moves really well, holds up really well. I mean, it's like a rabbit strip, but being pine squirrel, it's got that shorter hair, comes in a lot of awesome colors, and then adding a little rubber legs to it. Beads, you can get beads now in all kinds of colors. So I might throw like an orange or a pink bead on there to kind of add a little flash to it, something they can kind of target. I've got a couple other like nymph patterns that are a little more traditional looking. I do like a jig hook, so I'll tie these smaller nymphs still on a jig hook, still usually with a tungsten bead, but then I'll add like a kind of a hot spot with a little bit of dubbing, or just I usually use like a fluorescent red thread or orange thread, sometimes chartreuse, just something that'll make it pop just a little bit. Most of the time those fish can see those flies. They're really good at seeing, but I think you got to get those flies down pretty well. That's where the tungsten really works. Bigger cones, etc. So you're getting it down into their zone. Again, these fish are in colder water, a little more lethargic. So mostly nymphs, and then I will run some bigger streamers. I actually like that baby gunga would definitely be on the list for a fly to use. There's another one called Sculpzilla, great little articulated fly, gets down really deep, a little bit bigger. So yeah, kind of that streamer pattern. I don't know. I don't get too hung up on a ton of different things. I think a lot of times it's fly placement over exact fly to use, but the typical colors, olive, natural, a little bit of white or gray. I like to add a little chartreuse to a few of them, a little pink to some of them. Obviously, another one that comes to mind, speaking of pink, is the pink squirrel. It's a very well-known fly here in the Driftless on the Wisconsin side, and it's been used all over. Great little pattern. John Bethke made this fly, and it's super awesome. I kind of tie it in a tungsten bead as well, which is kind of cool. So,
yeah, and to kind of help people, it's kind of funny, right? Because small streamer means different things to different folks. So,
right, I should caveat that yeah, a small streamer, we're talking nothing more than nothing bigger than 2 inches. I know some guys will use bigger. I know in some areas, they're using 3, 4, or 5 inch streamers. They're getting fish to move on them. But overall, where I'm fishing, these streams are pretty small. If I found a spot that was open, had a really deep pool, really, I'm trying to think here, like a bigger spot that might need to get a little bit deeper, I might throw something on a little bit bigger. Again, that baby gunga would be a pattern that you could get down pretty well. That's gonna actually get noticed pretty quick. In the real cold water, though, they're going to me, I think they key in on slightly smaller stuff that they know that they can attack and get, because they're cold, everything's cold. That's the other tactic. Like, you got to go low and slow. It's not a speed thing. With the water temps being in that cold range, go a little bit slower than you normally would. When you do hit days, though, just kind of keep going on that stuff. You can kind of speed stuff up. You might go a slightly bigger fly. The other thing I keep on hand, I also run some dries now and again. We get a small black stonefly that comes off. So I do carry some, like, kind of a black stonefly pattern that's kind of a dry. I call it like a foam stimulator. And it's got a black body to it, nice and thin profile. It works great during the summer as well for kind of a hopper or a cricket pattern, but it will work pretty good for when those black stoneflies come off too. So don't be opposed to using some of your rigs that have like a hopper dropper set up on it. They still know what stuff landing on top of the water and moving is. They haven't completely forgotten. So it can be handy. Usually it's on a nicer day. It's one of those days where you can get away with just wearing like a hoodie. If it's warmer like that, a hoodie and hopper dropper set up, or doesn't have to be a hopper. You could use a bigger, like, caddis type fly or something like that. So,
yeah, and so it's interesting. So on the nymph side, I imagine you're probably fishing what, like 16s and 18s?
Yeah, right in that zone. They tend to be small, although with those jiggy nymphs, they're probably right around maybe a 12. So, but most of the stuff I'm fishing in the Driftless is all pretty small. So, and don't be afraid to tie smaller flies on bigger hooks, because you get that better hook gap. But yeah, like 18 is pretty small for a nymph. So I'd say 16. I mean, I've used 18s, but I tend to I'll just tie smaller on a 16 because I want that hook gap there. Yeah, the jig hooks are nice because they've got a really big hook gap. So that's why I kind of gravitate towards those hooks as well. I like that bigger hook gap, and they seem to always be super sharp right out of the package. So,
yeah, the barbless stuff will definitely draw blood these days for sure.
Yeah, Yeah.
And so, I think we've got kind of, how not to freeze to death. We've got rod, reel, line, leader. We've got fly selection. Tell us a little bit about kind of how you approach and break down the water.
So a lot of times I will scout water. Again, wintertime's an awesome time to kind of scout, get out there. I'm looking for water, obviously, that is not frozen. That's kind of a key. Something that doesn't have too much shelf ice. That's more of a safety thing. But when you start finding water that's open, one, it usually has a spring, so the water's coming out of the ground. The riffle sections usually tend to be open because that water's broken. It's moving a little faster. It tends to stay open a little bit more. The big, long stretches, like a big giant pool, will tend to freeze over at times unless there's a spring coming in. Or if the water's a little bit warmer, say you get several sunny days and the temperature starts getting above that freezing point, it'll start opening up those areas. So I'm looking for that. I usually will fish downstream. I tend to like to swing some of my streamers and those big jiggy nymphs. And I tend to look for spots where the riffles kind of end and kind of go into a pool or a run that's got a little extra depth, and try to swing them right through there. So kind of like that's where I'm looking for is say like a nymph got dislodged off of that riffle section and it happened to dump in to the head of a pool or a run. That's what we're looking for. Swinging that into there also works really good for streamers. If you've got a small bait fish type streamer, because it's a fish that kind of got dislodged that was maybe farther up and then swings through there. So the fish will kind of hang out underneath there, dart in, grab that fly. I'll also look for deeper pools as long as it's open. And that's where I'm going to start maybe dredging a little bit deeper. So I'm casting maybe a little bit more 45-degree angle or more so that it can get some depth down there and be able to swing down through that area a little deeper, or even doing that, upstream fishing. So you're getting that depth nice and slow and getting through to the bottom. And then obviously if I'm running my hopper dropper style dry dropper, I'm going to be looking for areas that have a little more depth, but not too deep. Again, that kind of run right after a riffle where I think those fish might be lying so that they can kind of attack something that would come off of that riffle. Because that's usually where a lot of the small little nymphs and stuff are going to be. Or if it gets warm enough, that's where, say, these stoneflies will kind of come out, sun themselves, and then if they happen to fall in there, that's what they're kind of looking for. So
yeah, and the neat thing too is all those places you talked about are all the places in the summertime where the water is going to be cooler because that's where the springs are.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the other kind of fun thing is that, if it's really cold and say it's too cold to fish, it's actually a great time to run around and just kind of look at water, because you're going to find where all those little warm water outlets are. But the weird thing is in the summer, that's the cold water, because that water kind of stays consistent. It's coming out. So those springs popping up. So it's a great way to just get out there, find some cool water that you can fish, and you can usually fish it almost all season. I usually, when the water does get really hot during the summer, those fish use that as kind of that's their only reprieve. So I do try to stay away from it when it's really hot, but it is a great way to find where those springs are. Those fish will gravitate towards there. So, but yeah, and then, yeah, you're kind of looking for spots that you would look for most of the time. I will tend to fish a little bit more in the riffles because they will move up at certain times because the bugs get a little more active. So they'll move up into the riffles. So you're kind of hitting little pocket water sometimes. So that's always kind of fun to kind of hit that a little bit. And the cool thing is you don't have to have an indicator all the time for that. You can kind of just do it by feel or sight. It's not super deep there. So yeah, when you do find them though, I kind of, that's a pattern that you'll be like, okay, at this temperature, at this time, this is where they tend to be. And then if you happen to hit those weather windows like that, that's actually, you can pretty much go to any stretch of water. And if it's got a similar temperature, similar layout, riffles, etc., that's just like an awesome time to hit all that. So you've kind of patterned them so that later on you can hit that same water. And that's good to like write that down in your notebook if you keep notes, so that when you do, from year to year, you'll start seeing that they pattern very similar during certain times.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So like around here, I use trout routes to drop those pins and drop those notes.
Yep.
Because, I'm not like you. I'm not on the same pieces of water frequently enough to be able to like commit it to memory with a notebook. But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing thing to kind of start collecting that information. Or, like around here, you can get yourself in places that you have a hard time getting out of. So that's another great use for that application. Yep. Too. If folks want to get more information about, access, because I know you've got a really robust access program in the Driftless and, other fishing information, where should they go?
So there is some great, you just mentioned one, the trout routes. Trout routes have really done well. They're set up, and I actually don't run it, although I have been looking at it. But trout routes is really good. It kind of helps you kind of find some water. And then it also helps you find where you can park and access. Our access here in Wisconsin, throughout Wisconsin, is pretty amazing. There's a lot of maps there. You can actually go to the Wisconsin DNR site. They have very similar maps that trout routes have, but it doesn't cover everything. Some of counties are a little different with their access in that. The nice thing is TU has been really active in trying to put up signage for a lot of these places so that you kind of know where these access points are as well. Because not everybody is like computer savvy. So it is kind of helpful that way. I encourage people to get a guide, of course. Guides usually know where all the great access is. I'm fishing water that is open to the public. So, getting a guide that can kind of start you on your way is great. There's also maps. If you get the paper map, like when you get your license, they're usually at say like the hardware store or wherever you can buy like a license. I usually get mine online, but I'll hit the hardware store to pick up some maps. So every year they come out with the trout maps for that. And that's actually a really good way to kind of find some water as well. So maps, kind of old school way of doing it, but that really has helped me. That's kind of how I started years and years ago. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got all the gazetteers for where I fish under the waterproof mat in the back of the car.
Exactly. Yeah, those gazetteers are awesome.
Yeah. And so, for folks that don't know, PJ's Guide Service is an Orvis endorsed guide service, and you guide for lots of other stuff other than trout. You want to kind of tell folks kind of what you offer?
Yeah. So we are an Orvis endorsed guide company. We offer walk and wade for trout. We also offer trout drift trips in the area. We're one of just a few guide services that allow that. And then we also do smallmouth pike and muskie float trips on some of the larger rivers in the area. Like we'll go over to the Wisconsin and other bigger rivers like that. So we have a 15-foot stealth craft drift boat that we're running, and then we also run a stealth craft raft. So, and then obviously walk and wade. We do some trout schools in the springtime. We're also starting to offer now like custom trout schools. If you can get a few people together, you can come here. We have lodging and stuff like that so that you can stay here. My wife helps teach. She's a certified casting instructor. So we're able to offer a lot of plans for people. If you're just getting started, we can help you. If you're a seasoned angler, we can help you. So there's a lot of stuff that, even if you're brand new, don't have all the gear, we can handle that. We obviously carry a lot of Orvis stuff. The only thing we don't do are waders. So too many sizes for that. But we can, if you want to get on the water, we can do custom stuff. If you have somebody that is maybe not into angling, the cool part is you can bring them here. There's awesome stuff to do in town and around. And then we can take you fishing, and then they can take the car and go off and have an adventure that way. So a lot of options.
Very neat. And so what's a day on the water with PJ like?
Oh, so we usually, wintertime, it's usually just a half a day, so 4 hours. We get out to the water and then do 4 hours and warm up and all that. If we're doing a full day trip, say in the summertime, we will tend to get out early, and then we will hit a couple of different stretches. So we'll get out in the morning, hit one area, we'll break for lunch, then we'll go hit another spot, either in the same watershed or move over to another piece of water and hit that. If we're doing a float trip, we will be heading downstream and obviously take a break for lunch. I sometimes will cook on the boat, or we'll set it all up. The boat's really comfortable, so we can do it all from there. So we'll get about 8 hours plus, depending on how the river's fishing, how the day's going, how everybody's holding up. Usually most people, they get about 8 hours in and they're pretty done with fishing. But sometimes I can go a little bit longer. It just kind of depends on the day and how everybody is feeling in that. And then like for schools, we tend to do those like 2-day schools. We do breakfast and lunch here at our place so that we don't have to like herd cats to a restaurant and do all that. We've got you here. We're going to start talking about fishing. And then we actually do get out on the water and try to do as much on the water as we can. So, and that's usually 2 days. That's about most people, that's a lot of information. We'll shove 5 years of information down you. But we have, a notebook and stuff like that for you to like look back and you can see what we were talking about, remind yourself and that. So yeah, we set it up how you want it to be set up. I do a lot of like kids trips with parents. That's always kind of fun. The kids have a great time. Usually by the afternoon, they're about burnt out. So they like to pick rocks or look at bugs or look at rocks. And then the adults can fish for a little bit. And yeah, it just makes for a great day.
Very, very neat. And I guess at this point, we're probably about halfway through show season. And I was wondering, are people going to be able to catch up with you somewhere on the road, for the next, I don't know, we got probably another 6 or 8 weeks of this left?
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of shows. We're doing the Wisconsin Fishing Show. and that's coming up. That's February 21st to the 23rd. We'll be there. We've got a booth there. We're in the hallway, so come on down. We'll actually have a raft there in our booth. And then my wife is actually giving a presentation for beginner fly fishing at that show. And then we're also going to be at Great Waters. My wife will be teaching casting there. And then I'll be at the Tires Rose, and that's going to be March 21st to the 23rd. So that's also coming up. That's a great show. And then that's in Great Waters is going to be in Minnesota, right there in the Twin Cities. So fun little show. That Wisconsin fishing show, that's going to be in Madison. And then I'm probably going to try to do a couple other shows, more of just kind of helping out Stealth Craft where I can. Again, if it's all weather dependent. But yeah, those are the two shows we're really going to be doing.
Yeah, got it. And I'll drop links to those in the show notes. And, PJ, before I let you go tonight, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, we were just looking back on some stuff. This is actually going to be my 15th year of guiding. So that's kind of a special thing. So yeah, that's a long time. We've been fly fishing here in this area for over 30 plus years. So, yeah, it's kind of a big year for us. We're looking forward to getting out on the water. My wife is definitely going to be spending more time. So we'll be able to do a lot more, say like trout schools and casting instruction if need be. That's what she loves doing. So it's definitely going to be a lot more offered for that part of it. We are more than happy to take people that are really new to it. We have been doing this for so long and teaching. There's not too much that we can't help you get into fly fishing. So super fun time.
Yeah, very, very neat. And so if folks want to learn more about PJ's guide service or follow your adventures on the water, where should they go?
So our webpage is pjguideservice.com. And then my email is pjguides@gmail.com. You can also find us on the Orvis website under guides. It's under PJ's Guide Service. I'm also on social media. I believe it's PJ Smith. And then I might be under PJ's Guide Service too. I don't always. That's always a weird one because I've got a couple of pages. But yeah, just look me up. I usually have my Instagram, Facebook. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, got it. And I'll drop links to all that stuff in the show notes for you. And PJ, I really appreciate you coming back on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate being able to do this. It's super fun. Just kind of spreading the word of fly fishing because I love it enough. I actually, that's why I do it. I love helping people get on to fish or just learning about this great sport.
Yeah, come back anytime. Take care.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed the interview as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. If the fly fishing show is coming to a town near you, head over to flyfishingshow.com to plan your visit. And don't forget to check out Trout Routes Pro at maps.troutroutes.com. Use ARTFly20, ARTFLY20, all one word, to get 20% off of your membership. Tight lines, everybody.